The storm had arrived 3 hours earlier. Then the forecast drones predicted that alone should have worried Ethan on Vera. 9 electromagnetic storms were not simple weather events. They rolled across the planet like living creatures, swallowing satellite signals, scrambling navigation systems, and occasionally convincing expensive equipment to explode for reasons no engineer could explain. Ethan's cargo crawler rattled across the ancient roadway as violet lightning danced through the clouds overhead. Perfect, he muttered, exactly how I wanted to spend my evening, lost on a forgotten planet while the sky tries to murder me. The dashboard immediately flickered and died. Ethan stared at it. The dashboard remained dark, you see. That's the attitude I'm talking about. A second later, the emergency power returned. The crawler continued forward. The ancient transit road stretched across the desert like a silver scar. Nobody knew who had built it thousands of years ago. Most people didn't care. It was simply another relic left behind by civilizations that had become dust long before humans arrived. Then Ethan noticed something unusual, a heat signature. His scanner blinked weakly. One life form motionless, less than 200 meters away. He frowned. Nobody should have been out here. The nearest settlement was nearly 80 km away. Curiosity won. It usually did. Ethan parked the crawler beside the road and stepped into the howling wind. Sand whipped against his jacket. The storm growled overhead. Following the scanner, he climbed down a rocky slope toward the ruins of an ancient transportation gate. The enormous structure rose from the desert like the skeleton of a giant machine. Another flash of lightning illuminated the area, and Ethan froze. Someone was lying beside the ruins. Woman. At first glance she looked human, then he saw her ears, long, elegant, distinctly alien. Her pale clothing was covered with dust. One arm was scraped. Her face was beautiful but exhausted, as though she had been fighting to stay conscious for hours. Her eyes opened slightly, bright silver, alert despite her condition. You are staring, she said. Ethan blinked. You are alive. An impressive observation. Thanks, I practice. The woman sighed. Even exhausted, she somehow managed to sound disappointed. Another burst of lightning lit the sky. Ethan crouched beside her. What happened? I fell. You fell? Yes, out here in the middle of nowhere. She hesitated very aggressively, despite the situation. Ethan laughed. The alien woman looked offended. I failed to see the humor. You described a catastrophic accident as aggressive falling. It is technically accurate. Ethan checked his scanner. No major injuries, but something was wrong. Neural activity around her spine showed irregular patterns. Can you stand? The woman tried. Nothing happened. Her expression tightened. No, you can't move your legs. No. Ethan looked toward the dark horizon. The storm was getting closer. Predatory creatures often emerge during electromagnetic events. Leaving her here wasn't an option. My crawler is up there. Wonderful. It only has one problem. What? It is currently dying. She stared at him. You possess a dying vehicle. To be fair, it wasn't dying when I bought it. The woman closed her eyes for several seconds. She said nothing. Then she asked quietly, why are you helping me? The question surprised him. Because you're stranded. Many would simply continue on their way. Many people are terrible. For the first time, something softened in her expression, only slightly, almost Invisibly, but Ethan noticed, thunder echoed across the desert. The woman glanced toward the approaching storm. Finally she spoke, "My name is LRA." Ethan neither moved for a moment. Then Ethan crouched lower. "What are you doing?" she asked. "I'm carrying you." LRA looked horrified. "Absolutely not. The storm says otherwise. I am not climbing onto a stranger's back." "Good news, you don't have to climb." Before she could argue, Ethan carefully lifted her. LRA immediately looked as though the universe had personally insulted her. "This is humiliating. Trust me," Ethan said while adjusting his grip. "You're not the first person I've carried. You have done this before. My cousin lost a bet involving gravity." "Do not understand that sentence." "You will." As the storm roared above them, Ethan began the long climb back toward the crawler. Neither of them knew that the fate of an entire star system had just shifted course beside a forgotten ruin in the desert. The crawlers survived the storm. Technically, according to Ethan, surviving and functioning were two completely different achievements. The vehicle crawled across the desert at a speed that could only be described as deeply embarrassing. Rain crackled against the metal roof. Sparks occasionally jumped from the dashboard. Every few minutes, a warning light appeared for a system. Ethan was fairly certain the vehicle didn't even possess. LRA sat in the passenger seat wrapped in a thermal blanket. Her silver eyes remained fixed on the windshield. "You seem calm," Ethan said. "I am calm. The vehicle just informed me that the left quantum stabilizer is emotionally unavailable." LRA glanced at the flashing warning. "Does the crawler even have a quantum stabilizer?" "No, and this does not concern you." "It concerns me that the crawler has developed opinions." For a brief second, the corner of her mouth moved, almost a smile. Almost. The road ahead disappeared beneath curtains of rain. Hours passed. Several times Ethan stopped to repair systems that should not have broken. Several times they broke again. Anyway, by dawn the storm finally weakened. The desert transformed into rolling plains covered with luminous blue grass. Tiny floating organisms drifted through the air like glowing lanterns. LRA stared at them. "They're beautiful." Ethan looked surprised. "You've never seen sky jellies before?" "Not this close. Really, they rarely appear where I lived." The answer felt strange. Everything about her felt strange. She spoke like an aristocrat. Her clothing, despite being damaged, was clearly expensive. Her hands showed no signs of physical labor, yet she claimed to be an ordinary traveler. Ethan decided not to press further for now. Around midday they reached a small settlement built around an ancient fusion tower. The town consisted of stacked metal structures, solar canopies, and hovering cargo platforms. People moved through the streets on anti-gravity scooters. Children chased maintenance drones. Life messy and ordinary. Ethan parked beside a repair station. "We're staying here tonight." LRA studied the settlement. "This is where people live. Generally, that's how settlements work, it seems." She stopped. "Small," Ethan offered. "I was going to say inefficient. That's a much rudder version." As Ethan unloaded supplies, several workers approached. One of them, a gray-haired mechanic, pointed at LRA. "What happened to her?" "Lost a fight with gravity." LRA sighed. The mechanic nodded. "Gravity wins most of those." Apparently satisfied, he walked away. LRA stared after him. That explanation was accepted remarkably quickly. You'll learn something important about Frontier. Worlds what? Nobody asked questions. They don't want answered. That evening, they entered a crowded food hall. The building buzzed with conversations. Miners, traders, engineers, pilots. Dozens of species from neighboring systems. LRA watched everything with fascination. A robotic waiter rolled over. State nutritional preference. Whatever is cheapest, Ethan said. Robot turned toward LRA. State nutritional preference. She hesitated. The answer seemed genuinely difficult. I have never ordered food. The robot froze. Its processor emitted a confused beep. Error statement statistically impossible. See, Ethan said, even the robot doesn't believe you. Eventually, food arrived. Lear examined the plate cautiously. What is this stew? From what animal? No one knows. She lowered the spoon. No one knows. Chef says asking ruins the experience. LRA looked horrified. Ethan laughed so hard he nearly spilled his drink. As conversations filled the hall, voices from a nearby table drifted toward them. A group of traders were discussing politics. The governors raised transport taxes again. They always do, they say. It's for infrastructure. Funny, infrastructure never seems to receive the message. Several people laughed bitterly. Another trader shook his head. The royal administration is completely disconnected from ordinary citizens. LRA became very still. Ethan noticed immediately. The conversation continued. They have no idea how people actually live. Maybe they don't care. LRA looked down at her meal. For the first time since meeting her, she seemed genuinely troubled. Not angry, not defensive, troubled. A seed of doubt quietly settling into her thoughts. The moment passed when alarms suddenly sounded outside. The entire hall fell silent. Red lights flashed across the walls. Ethan stood. So much for a peaceful dinner. What is happening? LRA asked. People rushed toward windows. Outside, 3 black aircraft descended from the evening sky, sleek, military, unmarked, far too advanced for local authorities. Ethan frowned. They're not from around here. LRA's face lost all color for a fraction of a second. Genuine fear appeared in her eyes. Not the fear of someone hiding from criminals, the fear of someone who recognized exactly who had come looking for her. And as the aircraft settled beyond the edge of town, LRA quietly turned away from the windows, hoping no one would notice the panic. She could no longer completely hide. The aircraft remained outside the settlement all night. 3 dark silhouettes resting beyond the perimeter lights, watching, waiting. Nobody in town seemed eager to approach them. Nobody seemed eager to ask questions either. On Frontier worlds, curiosity often shortened life expectancy. Ethan woke before sunrise and climbed onto the roof of the repair station. The aircraft were still there, silent, motionless. Their black holes reflected the pale light of dawn. Whoever owned them clearly possessed enormous resources, definitely not local law enforcement. A sound behind him made him turn. LRA sat nearby in a hovering cargo crate, or rather she sat with the kind of posture usually reserved for statues and royalty. Her silver eyes were fixed on the distant ships. You know them? Ethan said. She didn't answer immediately. No, the answer arrived too quickly. Ethan smiled. That's interesting. What is? You said no before I finished asking. For the first time, LRA looked slightly annoyed. You enjoy investigating people. I repair. Machines, that was not an answer, it was. Machines and people break for similar reasons. She folded her arms. I am not broken. Ethan glanced toward her. Motionless legs. LRA immediately understood that was rude. A little. You should apologize. You should stop lying. Neither spoke for several seconds. Then, surprisingly, LRA laughed only briefly. Only once, but it was the first genuine laugh Ethan had heard from her. The sound caught him completely off guard. By midday, they learned why the aircraft had arrived. The pilots were searching settlements throughout the region, displaying scans, questioning travelers, looking for a missing woman. Fortunately for LRA, the image being distributed showed her with dark hair. She currently had silver-white hair. The difference appeared deliberate, disguised. Technology interesting, very interesting. Ethan decided not to mention it for now. Instead, he focused on earning money. Their supplies were running low. The repair station owner quickly hired him after witnessing him repair 3 cargo drones and accidentally improve a fusion regulator nobody else could fix. For 2 days, Ethan worked while LRA remained in town. That turned out to be far more education than either expected, since she could not travel independently. People constantly interacted with her. Shopkeepers, workers, families, children, people who had absolutely no idea who she really was. One afternoon, Ethan found her speaking with a miner outside a supply depot. The miner looked exhausted. His clothing was stained with crystal dust. Transport fees increased. Again, the miner complained. Every shipment costs more. LRA frowned. Surely there is a reason. There is. What is it? The governor wants another palace. LRA blinked. Another miner laughed bitterly. That's what we heard. Hours later, she spoke with a cargo pilot, then a mechanic, then a farmer using hydroponic towers outside town. The story sounded different. The frustration sounded identical. Taxes, corruption, officials who never visited remote colonies, administrators who claimed everything was improving, yet somehow life kept getting harder. That evening, Ethan returned from work carrying food containers. LRA sat quietly beside the crawler, thinking. Something happened. Ethan said. She looked up. What makes you think that? You've been staring at the same wall for 15 minutes. There is no wall exactly. He handed her dinner. She accepted it absent-mindedly. After a long silence, she finally spoke. Do you ever wonder if people in power know what is truly happening? Ethan nearly dropped his food. That is an unexpectedly serious question. I'm asking. He sat beside her. Some know, and the other, they surround themselves with people who tell them what they want to hear. LRA looked away. The answer seemed to bother her more than it should. To change the mood, Ethan pointed toward the stars. If I ruled a star system, I'd solve everything immediately. LRA sighed. I'm afraid to ask. Mandatory nap periods. What, for politicians? That is your solution. Imagine how much trouble would disappear if everyone had a scheduled nap. She stared at him. You are ridiculous. I'm not finished. Oh no. Every governor must spend 1 month per year working ordinary jobs. That is impossible. Excellent. Then they can explain why life is impossible for everyone else. To Ethan's surprise, LRA laughed again, longer this time, warmer. Nearby workers overheard the conversation. Soon half the repair yard was contributing suggestions. Mandatory honesty in plants, weekly public debates, competitive cooking contests between government departments, one mechanic suggested launching corrupt officials into orbit for reflection purposes. Discussion became so absurd that people were wiping tears from their eyes, yet, beneath the laughter, Ethan noticed something. LRA wasn't merely amused, she was listening, really listening for perhaps the first time in her life. As night settled over the settlement, the distant aircraft remained beyond the horizon, Clear's throat waiting, searching, and while the people around her laughed and complained about rulers they would never meet, the woman they were criticizing sat among them in silent, slowly discovering a version of her kingdom she had never been allowed to see. 3 days later, they left the settlement. The aircraft had finally disappeared, but neither Ethan nor LRA believed the search was over. The crawler certainly didn't believe anything was over. Its engine produced a new sound every hour. By mid-morning, it sounded like an angry animal trapped inside a metal box. That's new, Ethan said. What is the screaming? The vehicle is screaming. Little. LRA listened carefully. The engine emitted a long mechanical howl. I dislike this machine. Join the club. Crawler eventually died beside a vast stretch of wilderness covered with glowing blue trees. Ethan climbed out, looked at the smoking engine, and nodded. Well, can it be repaired? Absolutely. LRA looked relieved. It will only require approximately 12 miracles. The relief vanished. By sunset they were walking, or rather Ethan was walking. LRA was once again riding on his back. The forest around them seemed alive. Thousands of floating lights drifted between the trees, ancient machines half buried beneath roots and moss occasionally emerged from the ground like forgotten monuments. The region had once belonged to a civilization that vanished nearly 20,000 years earlier. Nobody knew why. Nobody knew where they had gone. Even now, their technology occasionally activated without warning. As darkness settled across the forest, Ethan spotted one such machine, a tall silver pillar protruding from the ground. Its surface glowed faintly. Curious, he approached. That was a mistake. The pillar suddenly activated. A bright ring of energy expanded outward. The forest illuminated. Strange symbols appeared in the air. Then a holographic voice spoke. Welcome, authorized administrator. Ethan froze. LRA froze. The machine continued. Would you like to review galactic tax records? Ethan stared. 20,000 years. The machine waited. 20,000 years, Ethan repeated. And somehow the first thing it offers is tax records. Even LRA laughed. The machine remained silent for several seconds before asking again, would you like to review galactic tax records? No, request denied. What? You are not authorized to refuse. Ethan looked horrified. LRA was laughing openly now. For nearly 10 minutes they struggled to escape the ancient bureaucratic machine. When they finally left, Ethan looked genuinely exhausted. I survived electromagnetic storms. Yes. I survived raiders. Yes, I almost lost a fight with administrative paperwork. LRA smiled. A worthy opponent. For a while they continued through the forest. The mood remained light until Ethan noticed something. LRA was becoming quieter, far quieter than usual. Her hands trembled slightly. Sweat glistened on her forehead. You don't look well. I'm fine. You are terrible at lying. She looked away. Ethan carefully lowered her onto a fallen metallic structure. Then he pulled out his scanner. The results immediately erased his smile. "What is it?" she asked. He didn't answer. Instead, he scanned again, then a third time. The readings remained identical. The paralysis wasn't behaving naturally. Nerve pathways around her spine had been disrupted. Clear's throat not damaged. Disrupted. There was a difference. Huge difference. Injuries left chaos behind. This looked deliberate, almost engineered. Ethan frowned. "Someone did something to you." LRA became completely still. "What do you mean? You're nervous system?" He showed her the scan. Clear's throat. The pathways were interrupted by an artificial signal. She stared at the display, her face slowly lost color. "Can it be repaired?" Probably. I'm an engineer." "That does not inspire confidence." "I'm not that kind of engineer." The joke failed. For the first time since they met, genuine fear appeared in her eyes. Not fear for her life, fear of understanding something, a possibility she clearly didn't want to consider. "If this wasn't an accident," Ethan began. LRA closed her eyes. "No, if someone caused it." "No." The answer arrived instantly, too instantly, as though she had already considered the possibility many times and hated every conclusion. The forest grew quiet, only distant lights moved between the trees. Eventually, Ethan sat beside her. Neither spoke. Minutes passed, then LRA broke the silence. "There are people you trust because you believe you must." Ethan listened. "There are people you believe have always protected you." Her voice had become distant, and sometimes the idea that they might betray you is more frightening than any enemy. Ethan studied her carefully. The words felt personal, far too personal. Before he could respond, a sharp sound echoed through the forest. A branch snapped. Then another. Both of them looked up. Someone was moving among the trees. Several someones. Ethan immediately switched off the scanner. Lights flickered between the trunks. Multiple figures approaching, and judging by the precision of their movements, these were not travelers wandering through the wilderness. They were searching for someone, and this time they were very close. The lights moved silently between the trees, too organized, too precise. Ethan had spent enough time around security forces to recognize professional tracking teams when he saw them. Unfortunately, he had also spent enough time around security forces to know that running rarely improved the situation. "How many?" he whispered. LRA watch the moving lights. "At least 6. "That's not encouraging." "No, any encouraging information." She thought for a moment. "No, thank you." The lights continued approaching, closer, closer. Then a voice echoed through the forest. "Your Majesty." Everything stopped. Even the wind seemed to pause. Ethan slowly turned toward LRA. LRA closed her eyes. The silence lasted several seconds. Then Ethan pointed at her. "Your Majesty." LRA didn't answer. "You heard that, right?" "Yes, I wasn't imagining it." "No, that's unfortunate." The lights emerged from the trees. 6 armored figures stepped into view. Their black armor reflected the glow of the forest. Advanced military equipment, elite grade, far beyond ordinary soldiers. One of them removed his helmet. He was an older alien male with silver markings across his face. The moment he saw LRA, he lowered his head. "Your Majesty, we've been searching for weeks." Ethan blinked. Weeks. His eyes moved toward LRA, then back toward the soldiers, then back toward LRA, then Back toward the soldiers again. You. No, he said quietly, this conversation is developing in a direction I do not appreciate. The commander ignored him. His attention remained fixed on LRA. Please return with us. LRA remained silent. The commander stepped forward. We can ensure your safety. That was when Ethan noticed something strange. Not one of them looked relieved. Concerned, yes. Tense, definitely. Relieved, no. The feeling immediately bothered him. The commander looked like someone trying to complete a mission, not someone rescuing a beloved ruler. LRA noticed it too. What happened after I disappeared? She asked. The commander hesitated, a very small hesitation, but enough. The council has maintained stability. The council, yes, the council assumed authority immediately. Another hesitation. Ethan's suspicion grew. The forest suddenly felt much colder. The commander extended a hand. Please, your Majesty. Ethan slowly stepped closer to LRA. The soldiers immediately noticed. The commander looked annoyed. Human. This matter does not concern you. That's fair. The commander seemed relieved. Then Ethan continued, but every time someone says that, things immediately concern me. One of the soldiers sighed. Apparently, humans were exhausting. Across the entire galaxy, the commander activated a holographic display. Images appeared above his wrist. News broadcasts, official announcements, government statements. The Queen missing, emergency authority measures, temporary administrative control. Something felt wrong. Everything looked too prepared, too efficient, almost as though someone had been waiting for this crisis. LRA studied the images. Her expression hardened. Then she asked a question, a very simple question. Who authorized the emergency decrees? The commander's face changed, only slightly, but enough. The council. I never granted them that authority. Silence. The commander's jaw tightened, and in that moment Ethan finally understood. These people weren't here to rescue her. They were here to retrieve her. There was a difference, a huge difference. LRA seemed to reach the same conclusion. Slowly she looked toward Ethan, then back toward the commander. How did you find me? The tracker. What tracker? Again a hesitation. Tiny, brief, but real. Elra's eyes widened very slightly. Then she laughed. The sound shocked everyone, including Ethan. The commander looked confused. Your Majesty, the tracker wasn't supposed to activate. Nobody spoke. LRA's silver eyes locked onto his. It only activates if my neural systems are compromised. The forest became completely silent. The commander's expression finally betrayed him, just for a fraction of a second. But it was enough. Enough for LRA. Enough for Ethan. Enough for the truth. Someone had known exactly what happened to her long before they should have. The commander's hand slowly moved toward his sidearm. Ethan immediately reacted. Everyone looked at him. That seems bad. The commander looked irritated. What? The hand-to-weapon movement. You noticed it lacked subtlety. Before anyone could move further, a loud, mechanical voice suddenly echoed through the forest. Attention citizens, everyone froze. A nearby ancient machine buried beneath the trees had activated. Thousands of years old, completely unrelated, and apparently terrible at timing. Please complete your annual tax declarations. Ethan stared. The commander stared. The soldiers stared. Even LRA looked stunned. For 3 seconds, nobody knew what to do. Then Ethan pointed toward the machine. You see, even ancient civilizations had government problems against all logic. LRA laughed again. The commander did not, and that alone told Ethan everything he needed to know, because people searching for their queen would have laughed. People trying to control her future would not. For the first time since meeting LRA, Ethan understood the truth. The woman he had carried across desert, settlements, and forests was not merely connected to royalty. She was the queen herself, and some of the most powerful people in the star system wanted her found before she discovered what had really been done to her. Nobody fired a weapon. That was the strain part. For several long seconds, everyone simply stood there among the glowing trees, the commander, the soldiers, the queen, the human mechanic, and the ancient tax machine that had somehow become the most irritating participant in the confrontation. Reminder, the machine announced. No. Ethan replied. The machine paused. Response not recognized. Good. Commander looked increasingly frustrated. Your Majesty, this situation is becoming dangerous. LRA's silver eyes never left him. For whom? The question struck harder than any weapon. The commander had no immediate answer. That answer alone was enough. LRA slowly turned toward Ethan. Can you stand behind me for a moment? You are paralyzed. Please. Ethan obeyed. The commander visibly relaxed. Then LRA spoke. Her voice had changed. For weeks, Ethan had known her as LRA, a traveler, a stranger, a stubborn woman who criticized his food choices and insulted his vehicle. Now something else emerged. Authority, natural, effortless, terrifying. Commander Varric. The commander's eyes widened. You recognize me? I recognize every officer who swore loyalty directly to the crown. Silence. I also recognize when one avoids answering questions. The soldiers exchanged nervous glances. Lyra continued. Who authorized the emergency decrees? No answer. Who knew my neural systems had been compromised? Still no answer. The commander's jaw tightened. That was when one of the younger soldiers unexpectedly stepped forward. Your Majesty. The commander turned sharply. The soldier ignored him. Orders came from the Council of Regents. The forest became very quiet. Another soldier lowered her weapon. Then another. The commander suddenly looked much less confident. LRA simply watched, listening. For weeks she had listened to workers, merchants, mechanics, and miners. Now she listened to soldiers. The young officer continued. We were told you were injured during a terrorist attack. Terrorists? Ethan asked. That's what we were told. Ethan laughed. The soldier blinked. What? I carried her across half the planet. The soldier looked confused. And trust me, if terrorists had been involved, she would have mentioned it at least 30 times. LR shot him a look. 30 minimum. The young soldier tried very hard not to laugh. The commander did not appreciate any of this. Enough. His voice echoed through the forest. The tension returned. Instantly, the commander activated his communicator. Operation priority has changed. That sentence worried everyone, including his own soldiers. Then something unexpected happened. A bright beam of light appeared above the trees. A transmission, not local, orbital. Everyone looked upward. A holographic face materialized above the forest. An elderly alien woman, one of the senior advisors Ethan had seen on news broadcasts. The advisor looked directly at LRA. Then she bowed deeply, respectfully. Your Majesty, the commander cursed quietly. The advisor continued, the information has been delivered. What information? LRA asked. The evidence, a data package appeared. Thousands of files, communications, financial records, council meetings, private transmissions, evidence, collected by loyal officials who had suspected corruption for years, evidence they had been unable to deliver while LRA remained isolated inside the palace. Ethan stared. That is a lot of evidence. It took years to gather, the advisor replied. LRA began scrolling through the files. The deeper she looked, the colder her expression became. Hidden taxes, manipulated reports, artificial shortages, entire regions deliberately misrepresented. The kingdom she believed she ruled and the kingdom that actually existed were becoming two very different places. Ethan watched quietly. For the first time since meeting her, he saw genuine pain, not physical pain. Pain of realizing she had trusted the wrong people. The advisor spoke again. There are still loyal governors. There are still loyal officers. There are still loyal citizens. LRA nodded slowly. I know, because now she truly did know. She had met them, the miner, the mechanic, the trader, the pilot. Ordinary people, people the reports never mentioned, people the palace rarely saw. The commander suddenly deactivated his weapon. Then he removed his insignia. One sharp motion, metal hit the ground. I will not fight the crown. Several soldiers immediately followed his example. The confrontation was over, not because of force, because the truth had finally become impossible to ignore. Hours later, they sat beside a small campfire. The soldiers had departed. The advisor's transmission had ended. Only Ethan and LRA remained. The glowing forest stretched endlessly around them. LRA stared into the flames. You knew something was wrong before I did. Ethan shrugged. I repair broken systems. People are not machines. No, he smiled. But governments are surprisingly close. For the first time in hours, LRA laughed softly, tiredly. Then she looked at him. Would you still have helped me if you had known who I was? Ethan thought about it for several seconds, then nodded. Probably. I might have charged extra. LRA rolled her eyes. The tension finally broke. And for the first time since leaving the palace, the queen allowed herself to believe something she had not believed. In weeks, she might actually make it home, not as the ruler who had left, but as someone entirely different. The capital world of El shone like a jewel. From orbit, thousands of floating districts circled the planet. Rings of artificial light stretched across entire continents. Gigantic orbital elevators connected the surface to the stars. It was the center of one of the most powerful civilizations in known space. And Ethan hated almost all of it. There are too many stairs. The royal escort stared at him. We are in an anti-gravity palace. Then why am I still climbing things? The escort had no answer. 4 weeks after leaving the forest, everything had happened quickly. The evidence gathered by loyal officials spread across the network. Governors were arrested. Corrupt ministers disappeared from office. Hidden financial records became public. Citizens across dozens of worlds finally learned where their taxes had truly gone. The Council of Regions collapsed almost overnight, not because of rebellion, because Clear's throat. The truth reached everyone before the council could bury it. Now the final pieces were falling into place, and for The first time since the journey began. Ethan found himself standing inside the royal palace. The place was enormous. Beautiful and strangely quiet, LRA sat inside a medical chamber surrounded by advanced neural technology. Silver energy flowed around her body. Thousands of microscopic machines repaired damaged pathways within her nervous system. The paralysis that had stolen weeks of her life was finally ending. Ethan stood nearby, watching, waiting. The chamber opened, a soft hiss filled the room, then LRA slowly stepped forward on her own, no assistance, no support, no pain, for several seconds. Neither of them spoke, then Ethan smiled. "You are walking, I noticed. You seem happy about it. I am. You hide it remarkably well." LRA laughed. The sound came easier now, far easier than when they first met, weeks ago. She had viewed ordinary people from a distance. Now she knew their names, their struggles, their jokes, their frustrations. Most importantly, she had learned how little truth reached the palace walls. The journey had changed her, and she knew it. Days later, the largest public gathering in the kingdom's history filled the capital. Citizens from hundreds of worlds watched. Through holographic broadcasts, the queen appeared before them, not hidden behind advisors, not protected by carefully edited reports, just herself. She told them everything: the attack, the conspiracy, the corruption, the mistakes, especially her own. Many rulers would have hidden those failures. LRA did not, and strangely that honesty earned more respect than perfection ever could. Reforms followed, tax systems were rebuilt, governors became directly accountable to local populations, public review councils were established. Most importantly, LRA announced that every year she would personally travel through the kingdom without royal ceremonies to listen, to learn, to see reality herself. Some advisors nearly fainted. Ethan considered that a bonus. A week later, another ceremony was held, one much smaller, unfortunately for Ethan. It involved him. Thousands of people attended anyway. LRA stood before the gathered crowd. "Ethan Carter." Ethan stepped forward reluctantly. "I dislike where this is going." Several officials looked offended. LRA smiled. "For carrying a stranger across desert, storms, forests, and half a planet." Ethan sighed. "There it is," without knowing who she was. The crowd laughed. "And for reminding a queen how ordinary people actually live." LRA placed a royal medal around his neck. The crowd erupted into applause. Ethan looked down at the medal, then back at her. "Do I receive free food with this?" The audience laughed even harder. LRA shook her head. "You already asked. It remains an excellent question." Months later, life slowly returned to normal, or as normal as life could become after accidentally helping save a star system. Ethan returned to engineering work. His story spread everywhere. Children learned about it in schools. News networks interviewed him endlessly. Someone even wrote a book. The title was terrible. Ethan complained about it publicly. That somehow increased sales. One evening, long after the celebrations ended, Ethan stood on a balcony overlooking the capital. Countless lights stretched across the horizon. Behind him, footsteps approached. Not guards, not advisors, just LRA. She stood beside him. The wind moved through her long ears and silver hair. For a while they simply watched the city. "It looks different," she said quietly. "The city, The kingdom, Ethan nodded, because it did not perfect, never perfect, but better and improving. The silence felt comfortable, earned. Finally, LRA spoke. When I first met you, I thought you were reckless. I was carrying a stranger through a storm, exactly, and now she smiled. Now I know you were reckless. Ethan laughed. That's fair. Far below, the lights of the Capitol shimmered like stars. For a moment neither spoke. Then LRA looked toward the countless worlds beyond the horizon, the people she served, the people she finally understood, and Ethan looked toward the future as well. Neither of them had found what they expected during their journey, but both had found what they needed. A queen had learned to see her people. A mechanic had discovered that one simple act of kindness could change millions of lives. And beneath the endless stars, their story finally came to end.